Hey there, this is Will Marshall at Pyramind in San Francisco. Today I'm going to be showing you how I've been going about mixing the lead saxophone parts in a few kind of funk, electro-funk tracks I've been working on lately. Now, I'm not going to play you the whole track because it's not published yet, but the kind of guitar and the saxophone parts, the final parts that we went with, together sound like this. So, I had never recorded or mixed saxophone before, and when I first started, I was initially a little bit lost. But I did some research and did some thinking, and what I realized was that saxophone is very, very similar to human voice in the way it's processed. And so what I ended up doing was going with largely iZotope Nectar, which has processing tools that are designed for the human voice, but I found gave me really good results on the saxophone part. So if we solo just the sax part, what I'm going to do is put it in advanced mode so I can do everything kind of in order. We're going to go through and EQ the sound roughly, doing all the kind of basic stuff, a nice high pass, push the lows a little bit maybe, roll off the ultra high frequencies we don't need. Narrow the Q on this, it's a little much. I'm kind of just doing this by feel and by ear, trying to get a richer saxophone tone. And I think a little boost around that 2K mark, a nice narrow boost might give me kind of a heat or an edge to the sound. So, un-EQ'd. Now, that sounds kind of good to me. I think maybe a little dip, if I add another pole, here's a pole. If I put a little dip around that 1.5K range, it will narrow that down. It might tighten up the sound a bit. Yeah, there's a kind of nasal sound in that kind of 1.5 to 2K range. And I don't like the nasal edge that saxophone sometimes has, so I found it there. And kind of pulled that out. Now it's a subtle change, but to my ears it does kind of tighten up the sound a little bit. And let me narrow these. So I have a slightly richer tone. Now, when I mixed the saxophone for real, I actually sat down with several articles on kind of how to mix saxophone. There were a lot of instructions on specific frequency groups and stuff. So if you're looking to kind of really dial in the EQ, I suggest you actually sit down with a big EQ and a couple of articles and spend a couple of hours playing with it. It definitely took me a long time to get this exactly right, but this is roughly what I ended up doing. Now, the next thing I did was add a little saturation. Now, iZotope has this really nice built-in saturation plugin. If I turn it all the way up, it'll sound like this. And it just adds a little bit of kind of warmth and presence to a sound that can be a little bit dry. For reference, by the way, this saxophone was recorded with a Shure SM7B. So it's a very, very dry. It was the mic was right up on the saxophone. So we have a very dry sound that we're trying to deal with. So after some saturation and EQ, I dialed in some compression and I went fairly heavy. I dialed back the attack and the release a little bit on the compressor. And I switched it to a vintage kind of feel just because I'm trying to go for an old school 70s vibe with this, so I don't want a super clean compressor. And I'll put on the auto gain here. So I put on a little compression here, backed off the attack and the release a little bit, but not too much, and I actually went fairly heavy on the compression. You can see I've got a lot of compression going on here. Turned on auto gain, And if you listen to the AB, it gives it kind of a thicker and warmer tone to my ears. And so the last two things that really kind of brought this saxophone part to life were throwing on some delay. And what I did was did a kind of standard slapback style delay. So kind of around that 70, 80 millisecond mark. Put it on tape mode because I like tape slapback. What I'm going to do is put the dry all the way at 100%. I don't want to turn this down at all. Bring the wet up a bunch, and I'm going to listen to the tone of the slapback and try and get it sounding as sweet as possible. See how that adds just a little bit of like life and liveliness to the saxophone part. Now a slapback delay like this is usually a pretty subtle thing, like it's not audible to someone who isn't a mix engineer or involved in music, but it can add just a lot of life and movement to an otherwise a little bit dull part. So once we've done all that, the last and probably the most integral element of this is putting reverb on the saxophone part. Now, again, this is a plate reverb that comes with Nectar, and it's really designed to work on vocals, and vocals and saxophones are similar, so I ended up getting really good results with this. And all I did was bring down the decay a little. Didn't want a super long decay, and I brought down the width because in this context of this song, I wanted this saxophone to be kind of in the middle rather than spread out to the sides too far. So I found a sweet spot for that width setting where it was kind of wide enough to give it some life, but not spread all the way out to the sides of the mix where it doesn't need to be. And then lastly, I'll turn up the wet all the way for a sec. You can saturate the plate reverb, which I really love. Selects AB the whole thing. This is our original sound. And here is our processed sound. I'll bring that down a little. So you can see it instantly adds life and breath and liveliness to a saxophone part that would otherwise be fairly flat. Now the one final thing I did was bring up PSP Vintage Warmer, like so. And I dialed in some, basically some tape saturation and compression that's kind of moving dynamically with PSP. So I'm going to put the meters up here in ppm so I can see exactly what's going on. I'm going to put it in fat multi-mode, just because I tend to like fat multi-mode on lead kind of sounds. And if I bring down the knee, which is just a knee setting on the compressor here, we'll be able to see the compression amount. And so that's giving me about 3 decibels of compression. We turn that off, turn it back on, and then I can back the mix off to maybe half-half. So to my ears, that gives us just a slightly kind of warmer and more natural feeling. It emulates some of the non-linearities associated with old 70s tape. And this kind of saxophone sound is obviously going for a very 70s vibe. So So that's it. Basic processing for getting a saxophone part to sound as good as I can get it. Thank you very much.
If you're a music producer, subscribe to our channel and stay up to date on the latest Pyramind tutorial videos, track breakdowns, elite sessions, and more. Visit us at pyramind.com.